Hello, story seekers. You know what time it is. Once again, we're going to be asking some questions, and this time we're going to ask questions to the absolutely glorious master of Kung Fu, CC Adams. CC, are you ready for questions?
Oh, I wouldn't say master of Kung Fu when I've only got my yellow belt and nothing else, joys of a busy life. But
That that
yeah,
means you've
thank you for
stumbled
having me
above
nonetheless.
all of us.
Pretty cool.
So, what's the first story you wrote which meant something to you?
Um, that's a good question.
Thank you.
The, the first story I wrote was a 100-word drabble, which was called On Reflection. The first story I ever sold, even though this was to a for exposure market, which means that you just get your name in print, as it were. They don't give you any money for it. I think the first story I wrote that really meant anything to me in terms of, if you like, professional legacy was the novella But Worse Will Come. Because up until that point, I had stories which were published in various anthologies. But what I wanted to do was to have my name appear on the cover of a book, something that I had wholly written and outlined and researched and all the rest of it. Something that, again, where it's just me. And because it was the first novella, the first book, I'd taken great pains to make sure that I had done, as I do with all my work, not only a good story, but an honest story, nothing gratuitous. Wanted something cool that an audience could buy into and lose themselves in, even down to the cover art for the book. I paid for the artist out of my own pocket because I knew exactly how I wanted the artwork to look. And in more ways than one, it is quite possibly my favorite work of mine today. As a result, I still sleep with the light on because of that book. So,
Still,
despite the fact that I wrote it, it
yeah.
still has that effect on me. I can actually read it as a reader rather than the person who wrote it.
Do you find there is another level to being disturbed by the fact that it came from your brain as well? That it might be, is it somehow, is that also disquieting? Like I haven't really written much like horror stuff,
Mm.
but but I can imagine it must be quite dark when you go to those places in your brain and to know that they exist.
Uh,
Is that a
I mean,
factor, or is it?
it's interesting that you mentioned that because to date, and this is not the story in question, but I've only written one story that has disturbed me. As in, I look back and even when I read it, I think, yeah, that's really twisted. That's really dark. That's really disturbing. But in terms of what the novella But Worse Will Come has done to me, and now I need to sleep with the light on, there is a particular scene in there that if and when you read it, that might start to make sense. That's actually based on the room that I currently sleep in. So,
Ah,
so it is one of those things that when you have watched the film or you have read a story which is dark in nature, insidious in nature, goes to some dark and insidious places, it's one thing to experience that story there and then, but what happens after the end credits have rolled or you've closed the book and then those ideas, those concepts, they start to creep around in your mind. In the quiet of the aftermath, those things really weigh on you. As in, imagine how it would be if this shit really happened.
mm.
Yeah.
I wonder if you're going to be the first author to have to move house because of the story that they wrote about their own bedroom.
That thankfully won't happen anytime soon. It's been disturbing in that sense, as in, oh, now I can't sleep with the light off. But
Mm,
that being said, in the harsh light of day, then the monsters vanish for the most part.
good, good.
I don't know, man. They live in your brain. Those monsters technically can't go anywhere.
Yeah, they fall out of your ears during the day, and they only creep back in at night. So, so we spoke a little bit about it in the last episode, but
Mhm.
where would you recommend that the folks listening start reading your work?
I mean, I know from the last episode I said misery in other lines simply because of not only the various horrors that appear in the book, but also how London is captured as a character. So, given that for pretty much all the work I write, it's based in and around London, there's only a couple of instances in my published work where it's outside of London. One is a werewolf story, which is in, I think, Pennsylvania, and the other one is, let's say, a supernatural menace which happens on a lake in Canada. So if you want to get a feel of what my work is typically like, you could start with Misery and Other Lines, which, as I said, is based in and around London Underground, the network as a whole. You could start with Downwind Alice, where, among other things, you might encounter a kind of like a country mansion where people get married. And I can say that because I got the idea for this place from when my cousin got married. You could also start with my closure novel, which is based in and around a suburban family in East London. You could start with There Goes Pretty, for example, whose anniversary is coming up. That was published on Valentine's Day a number of years ago, which is based in Southwest London, which is the area I live in. But the opening scene is actually based, I think, at the Globe Theatre, which is on the riverbank of the Thames. It's
Yeah.
what they call it, South Bank kind of area. So you'll see various parts of London. You'll see various aspects of London. You might see the gritty. You might see the low budget. You might see the glitzy. There's a lot of diversity to London, whether it's the architecture, whether it's the people in it, whether it's their sexual orientation, whether it's their race, their age. There's just a whole lot of diversity. And to be honest, as much as I love the city, in case you hadn't guessed, I would be doing it a serious disservice to not capture it as a character in my work, the same way that I capture characters who are living and breathing, and some that are not living and breathing, and some which are human and some which are not. To me, London is a character that deserves to be represented fully and faithfully. So I do my best to try and do that.
Do you ever sort of like pull up the underground map and go, right, I've never been to Swiss Cottage. I'm going to go there today and I'm going to see what story it births in me? Or do you think you've covered most of London now?
I don't know. I don't think I've covered most of London. What I am mindful of, and again, as someone who is born and raised in the capital and proud of, I like to experience London. I like to go out in it. I have my, if you're my go-to haunts, like the Jazz Cafe, which is in Camden. So as an example, my novelette Forfeit Tissue is based in the Jazz Cafe. And specifically, it was one time when I was up in Camden and I wanted to see what was on, and I seen that they were closed for refurb. And me, with an overactive imagination, I start thinking, well, why would it be closed? Imagine if this happened, and imagine if someone was trapped there while this happened. And so it isn't necessarily places that I feel I should go to, and then I get a story out of them. My my love for the city and the fact that I still want to live a little and go places and do things and all the rest of it. There are certain things I'll see when I'm out and about, and I think, you know what, that would be pretty cool.
Mm.
And it starts from there.
I think it's a really good thing for it to be a character, to be this like living, breathing thing inside all of your work. So I know Nico's a local lad as well, but I was also born in London, and
Oh, excellent. Where
and
are you
I
based?
So I was Enfield, so very very northern London, but it's technically a London borough, so technically, but for
Yeah,
me,
it's
Going from
allowable.
to the east.
All good.
and yeah, you're to the east, aren't you, Nico?
Yeah.
But
Oh, sorry, east where?
Leytonstone.
All right. Not far from my gym, which is Muscleworks, which is Bethnal Green. So
oh, classic.
yeah, I've been up to Leytonstone once or twice.
I can only apologise.
No, no worries. I was actually up there doing, at least the last time, doing research for a novel that I am currently doing edits on, which, and I'll say this at this point, it involved someone getting a tattoo. So I went to, I think they're called Tattoo Ink. They're about maybe less than 5 minutes walk from the station.
Yeah.
Well, one of my guys who, incidentally, I used to do kung fu slash kickboxing with. That's where I know him from. He's a tattoo artist. So I swung by the studio, see him and his boss and another one on the team to get some general background on tattoos as research. And this is what I mean. I didn't necessarily make a point to go to Leytonstone as such, but from someone I know who is a tattooist, and I thought, well, this is a cool idea. And he said, yep, he had some bandwidth to give background and insight, as did his boss. Yes, I went up there for an hour or two and just got some background, take
That's really
pictures,
cool.
take some video, that kind of stuff.
Did you get a tattoo?
No, only once. Where let's just say I was playing fast and loose with an area of my anatomy. So after, yes, the things that young reckless men do, young, dumb, full of cum. So after that episode was put behind me, I did think about getting a tattoo as a reminder. Don't do dumb shit again, and focus on being a strong, proud, resilient individual, and all the rest of it. But then I just figured maybe relative anonymity isn't a bad thing, as in no distinguishing marks. That's the rationale I had at the time. So even though I still remember the design, I never did get the tattoo.
Hmm.
So there is another story, or so many stories.
So,
Yeah, go on.
say hypothetically there were two
Uh-huh.
women that were being held hostage by a
No,
powerful,
no.
capricious bibliomancer, right? And that bibliomancer was hell bent on getting the best books he could for his magic library. What novel would you recommend to that wizard to save some friends you've made? Hypothetically.
As in any book that I've read that would pull a friend back from the brink.
Yeah, it would sort of intervene and take the wizard's ire away from these two guys just for a little while.
We just want an afternoon. They just want an afternoon off.
Yeah, that would be good.
I can think of two books I've read that have stuck with me and will continue to stick with me. But both of them horror. The first one you might be familiar with is Thor, which is written by Wayne Smith. And let me say for the record, and I know this might sound odd as a horror writer, I don't watch horror films anymore for the most part. They genuinely scare the shit out of me. And I was damaged to the point where I know some people have a kick or some degree of pleasure from watching a horror film. I don't find them pleasurable at all. So I can't watch them anymore. But the reason why I mentioned this is if you've ever seen a werewolf film called Bad Moon, this is actually based on a book called Thor by Wayne Smith, which is a werewolf novel. But the story is told from the perspective of Thor, who's the family dog, a German Shepherd. So that's one I would recommend.
That's a cool perspective.
Yeah.
And because Thor is not human, Thor is a dog, and you have the dog is telling the narrative, as it were. You have the perspective of a character who isn't human. So because Thor is not human, he's not going to have a human sensibility. You're also going to have the fact that as a dog, and he doesn't have a human sensibility, he has a dog sensibility. When Uncle Ted comes to see the family, Thor can pick up that something is wrong with Uncle Ted. Now, we know what it is because we read the back of the book before we bought it. But another hook to the narrative is seeing what Thor knows that the family don't. And
Yeah.
the third thing is, inevitably, shit is going to hit the fan. It is. Like, and there's certain tropes you can rely on, like with pretty much every werewolf story, there's the trope of something is coming. So, bad shit is coming, but you want to see what the bad shit looks like when it actually happens.
It's something very much like the sort of like the hanging blade, isn't it? The fact that the full moon is always coming. It's you're right. There's a sort of Damocles to a werewolf story, isn't there?
And
Have you ever
not
used?
necessarily. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, have you ever used that kind of like alternate perspective stuff in your own writing? Like, what did that inspire you to put like non-human perspectives in, or very very almost alien perspectives in your work at all?
I wouldn't say it was. I wouldn't say it was necessarily that, but there are certain things that I like to do in a narrative in general. In that, I might do a narrative where the reader is ahead of the curve, but the character is yet to find out. Or on the flip side, the character is ahead of the curve, but the reader is yet to find out. In terms of the hanging blade, and I love that expression, by the way. I don't think I've ever heard that before, that the hanging blade. But for pretty much any werewolf film that I have seen or any werewolf book that I have read, there is always an element of something is coming. It just seems to be a trope of the genre. But I do feel that regardless of that trope, even if someone does warn you up front, there's a werewolf. I mean, even with American Werewolf in London, a film which I believe most all people have seen, we know what's done it. Not only because we know the name of the film, but even when we see a flash of the beast and it attacks the two kids on the moors, we can see that's not any sheepdog. We know it's not any sheep. But despite the fact that Jack has warned David twice, you're going to change. There is an element of something is coming, as in you're going to change, but David doesn't believe it until he's actually changing. So there's still that trope of something is coming. And there's always that inherent sense of carnage and mayhem, which werewolves they're never tidy creatures. They're never just kidnap someone and drag them off to their lair. No, there's all blood and mauling and evisceration and dismemberment. It's all very untidy.
Very savage.
So exactly. It is very savage.
That film still has one of the best werewolf transformations of all time, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I feel so.
So good. It's so good. So, when you've written your stories, whether it's a short story or a novella or a novel, whatever it might be, and you have your first draft of it, so you've gone from A to B and the whole story is done, but it's only a first draft. What is your editing process at that point?
The first thing I will do is I will leave it for what is usually around a week or two, maybe a couple of weeks. Okay. I have a couple of friends I think they're in Manitoba. If and when they get to hear this, Terry, Matt, I'm very sorry if I got where you live wrong. But they got me a whiskey glass some years ago engraved with 3 words, "Get shit done." So what I usually do before and after I start writing one of these drafts is I will have my Jack and Coke in this glass as a toast to the work that I will start. And I'll also have another one when I finish the first draft of the work. That is my ritual. I leave it for about 2 weeks. Then I go back to the draft and I do basic cleanup in terms of all the typos, because I don't edit the typos as I go because it takes too much time. What I do want to do is get the first draft down at all costs. So getting a tidy draft is not the main concern.
Yeah.
Getting a finished draft is the main concern. And the good thing is, at least once I have a finished draft, then while I'm multitasking, I might be listening to the radio or whatever else the case might be, then I can do basic cleanup on the typos and the more obvious plot holes, that kind of stuff.
Mm.
My friend Terry, who I just mentioned, she is one of my closest friends. I love her to bits. She is also probably my harshest critic. She reads pretty much the first draft of everything. And because the first draft, as it suggests, is not the finished draft, she gets to see the rough stuff and she has an idea of where I will take the stories, but because she doesn't see the final draft where it's all nice and tidy and all the rest of it, then she's really dealing with something which, relatively speaking, is sloppy, despite the fact I go through and clean up the typos, the grammar slips, and all that kind of stuff. But she has the patience to pick through that stuff, tell me what she thinks works and what doesn't work, what is good, what doesn't sound realistic, and all the rest of it. So what I generally do after the first draft is I will do a first round of edits. Terry will nearly always get the first draft. I love her to bits and I trust her that much she'll have to get the first draft. Someone like Kit Power, if you know Kit Power, someone else who I love to bits,
Oh, yeah.
he might get the first draft, although to be fair, with Misery and Other Lines, for example, I didn't want him to do a draft, or rather a beta read of the work. It was such such a labor of love, and again, it's without giving too much away. It's a collection of interwoven stories in non-linear narrative, and this is where the fact that London Underground is a whole lot of lines that intersect. This is, I thought, a good way of telling all those stories. So Kit didn't know that up front. So when I'd actually given the story to him, it was only to have him read it first. If he liked it, then I wanted him to write the foreword. Yes, he knows the kind of stuff that I would write, and he's read my stuff before. But for something which, as I said, the format and the intention and the style is a little different. I didn't want him to just do a beta read. I want him to go in blind, as I often do with his work when I read for him, and see how that landed with him. But in terms of the people that I have on board to read, if you like, the second draft after I've done my basic cleanup on it, it's one thing if they like the work, it's another thing if they actually get the work, if they actually understand the story that I'm trying to tell. And Kit and both he and Terry, they're two of the people I can rely on. They get the story that I'm trying to tell, which is partly why they come first.
Mm.
Then there's another round of beta reads after I've picked through their notes and tightened up the draft some more. I'll generally do another round of beta reads. I'll ask different people this time. And then after I've done those edits, I will pretty much look to shop the work to a publisher.
Yeah. So, how do you go about picking beta readers? Obviously, you've got some people that you trust, they get it straight away. But when you get to that next wave of beta readers, what's your criteria? How do you pick people?
So this is a good question. Before I started writing with professional intent, I used to moderate an online forum for author Kelly Armstrong, and among other things, Kelly Armstrong had an area on her forum which was called the OWG, which was the online writing group. So Terry, for example, is someone I know from that forum. Having known her for a while, and even outside of the writing, again, she's one of my best friends, so I trust her with my work.
Yeah.
To find people who, and even now as I'm saying this, I'm thinking, how would I end up friends with this woman? Because we don't have, I don't think, the same lifestyle. We don't have the same background, but we have common ground. I love her to bits. Love her to bits, as I love her husband to bits as well. They're good people. I'm blessed for knowing them. But in terms of the story aesthetic, we have spent enough time together hanging out and all the rest of it that she has a handle on my creative sensibilities. Again, she might like the stuff that I write. In some instances, she doesn't like the stuff that I write. She'll tell me, I didn't like it. I thought it was terrible. I didn't like any of the characters. I'm really sorry, and all the rest of it. But it's all good because we're still friends. But again, someone who at least gets the story that I'm trying to tell, even if they don't like the story that I'm trying to tell. What I also do in terms of, if you like, auditioning beta readers, generally when I'm between projects, when I've written one story and done my edits on it, and before I get to writing another story, is I will do a lot of beta reading myself, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, it helps my peers in the community, but not all of it is altruistic. Because for one thing, if I'm reading other people's stories, it keeps me sharp. That's one aspect to it. Another aspect to it is that if I'm reading for other people, I'm more likely to get someone volunteer if I need a beta read.
Mm-hmm.
And what is also key is in reading other people's stories, I get an idea not only of their creative sensibilities, but I also get an idea of their work ethic. So while I'm doing that, I actually get to audition other people. So as I said, yes, it does help my peers in the genre community, but it's not entirely altruistic. I get benefit out of it as well.
Smart and sensible.
Yeah, it is. I know. I've only really had a bit of beta reading done by personal friends and things like that. Not necessarily writers, but I know, Nico, you've stretched out a little bit in that after FantasyCon. I think, have you had some people read your book?
Yeah, there were some people I met at FantasyCon that I thought they're nice. I get on with them, and they're way more experienced than me. And I think in a big way for me, it's been someone actually telling me, no, this is functionally a book. It needs work, but it does exist. Because it is quite easy to look at your own work and go, well, it's just words and it's probably crap and self-doubt. But I think it's an interesting step towards it, sort of putting a foot on your own back so that you have to fight to stand up and do something with it.
That's good.
Now,
so yeah, go on, Nico.
No,
please, after you.
So who inspired you to actually start telling your own stories?
Okay, this goes back to the same days of Kelly Armstrong's online forum. So she had the online writing group. Even before I joined the online writing group, the OWG, I had written some fan fiction based on her work. Her having written a novel called Bitten, which was, at the time, I believe it was optioned by Warner Brothers, and it was with Angelina Jolie in the lead role and about a female werewolf, which, I mean, to be fair, as much as I don't watch horror films now, and I like to think I kind of keep my ear to the ground, female werewolves now are, I would imagine, more of a thing, but back then, to hear of a female werewolf, it's like, what now? It was unheard of, but then these are progressive times that we live in. So, sorry, I've forgotten the question. Where was I? Please remind me the question.
It's like, it was who inspired you to start telling your own stories?
That was it. So, despite having written some fanfic, which is stories based on someone else's mythos or their creations, The fanfic that I'd written about 2 or 3 short stories based on her mythos. It was well received by other members of the forum. And how it often is when you are on an online forum, or at least when you go into a shop to buy one thing, you might wander around to see what else is going on in the shop. So
Yeah.
it was with the forum. So despite having written some fanfic and engaging in an online debate every now and then, I also realized that there was an online writing group, which is when I had first heard of NaNoWriMo, or National Novel Writing Month.
Yeah.
So after I had watched various forum members try their hand at NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, for about a year, I watched them for about a year, the online interactions. 2009 was when I had first signed up for it, and to date, the only time I'd signed up for it. And the challenge is to write a 50,000 word novel in 30 days in the month of November. You don't get any prize money, it's just, can you write a novel in 30 days, yes or no? So, my first and only time doing it, I did 52,000 words in 29 days. That was what prompted me to think, you know what, there might be something here. Why don't you run with it and see how far you go? And I appreciate this is a long-winded answer, but there is a point to it. So because I'd already written a novel, I figured let me try something else. Another member of the online writing group, a guy by the name of Ian O'Neill, who is also Canadian, who's also written some fiction as well. Despite the fact that I had written a novel, as you might imagine for a first attempt, it wasn't the brightest, shiniest diamond of a work that anyone could have written. It needed a lot of work, but then it was my first novel, so what do you expect? What Ian had done was, even though he couldn't spare a whole lot of time in terms of constructive feedback and guidance and support and all the rest of it, he would spare a minute or two here and there in terms of, yes, you have the passion to write a story, you have the story, the bare bones is there, but it needs work. This is the work it needs. You are doing too much telling instead of showing, and your sentences are too short and choppy, and it reads like a comic, and various other criticisms that he would give. But the one thing that stuck with me was, and this is such a catch-all expression for those interactions we had. He would sign off with, "Now go write something," which was everything from you're doing well, keep at it, to you go kick some ass. So the novella that I wrote, There Goes Pretty, which, as I said earlier, is coming up to its anniversary. It was released on Valentine's Day a few years back. The dedication in that book is to him, and that's why it says, "To Ian, I went and wrote something," because that's what he would always tell me. So the book is dedicated to him, and it felt good to, in that sense, give something back and dedicate a work to someone who's had that impact and that guidance on your trajectory. It is a good feeling.
It sounds like it. I mean, to have such a positive figure in your writing career, it sounds just indispensable. Like really positive.
So,
and again, it's not even about how much time we racked up with those interactions, because it was never a lot, but it's the fact that no matter how small or how brief it was, he would give something, the encouragement of, this is good, you got something here, keep at it.
That's cool as hell, man. So I'm going to ask you one that's it can be a little bit tough, but what place does religion have in storytelling for you? I mean, especially in horror, where it is quite a common theme. Do you use religion, and how do you feel about the use of religion in stories?
My mic works. I'm just having to think. I'm just weighing the question.
Yeah, no trouble.
You're allowed to think. You can get real theological with it if you want.
Yeah, we encourage it.
I mean, for most of the stuff that I write, it is based in and around the everyday. It's not necessarily themes of religion or heaven and hell, or even good and evil. So
Yeah.
to use my novella, But Worse Will Come, as an example, without giving too much away, the protagonist is stalked by a horror from his childhood, and there's an exchange in the book when the horror in question says, "You think I'm evil just because I want to eat? That's not the case.
Hmm.
It's, as far as I'm concerned, your food and your time is up. There's nothing evil about it." So, so while there are those themes I play with which aren't necessarily good and evil, there are some that I do play with, which are around um, possession and demons, and certainly those are some of the monsters that I really love. The idea being
Yeah.
that with a demon, certainly as in, if you like, conventional Western law, conventional Western mythos, these are they're 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 so supernatural. They're so insidious, that they're so malevolent. And the fact that when someone is possessed, at least again as per conventional Western mythos and the stuff that you might see in films, it's
Yeah.
not always evident that someone is possessed. And this is one of the things I love in horror in general, that demons can hide. Now, that being said, for those stories that I write where demons do feature, and there are some where demons feature, even though there might be a demon in the story, it doesn't necessarily mean that there is, if you like, a religious aspect in the story.
Yeah.
What I am conscious of, and this is often when I come back to the house from when I've been out to wherever, I walk past at least a couple of churches. There are a couple of churches in the area,
Yeah.
and while I have in mind at least one novel which does touch, if you like, heavily on those things, for me to bring it to life authentically, as I said, with so much of London that I would capture, this is just another aspect that I would have to do service to if I'm going to do it at all. So it needs that much more research, especially since I'm not a religious person. Yes, I might have a credo, I might have some degree of spirituality, but I'm not religious. In
Yeah.
terms of the place that I think religion has in the genre in general, how could it not? When you have, if you want to see it as completely black and white in terms of good and evil, or even shades of grey, then yeah, religion does come into it. Without digging into too much detail on this, if religion is, if you like, a guide for living a quote unquote good and honest life, on the
Mm.
flip side, there are a lot of despicable and atrocious things which have been done in the name of religion. And that's
Yeah.
without the, if you like, the supernatural aspect. Just because something isn't supernatural, that doesn't make it evil. So for us as horror exponents, whether we tell those stories through writing, or whether we do it through acting on stage, or whether we do it through direction in film, whether we do it with artwork in terms of pictures, what sculpture, whatever the case might be, there is there's definitely that place in horror for religion. How could there not be?
Yeah.
Given what actually happens in the real world, if nothing else, it's certainly going to be a way of telling those stories which have actually happened. You could call them documentaries, or you could take some degree of artistic license with it and say the following events happened on this day, and what really happened is this, and we leave it to you to decide if that really happened. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's too much of a playground, and it's too much the real world to
Yeah.
ignore for this genre.
I think especially when you write so much set in London, it's such a multicultural melting pot. There are,
Exactly.
you look at the skyline of London, it's full of beautiful cathedrals and
Yeah,
mosques and temples, and I think you're probably making the right choice to not have it be a key focus, but accepting that it is, it's part of the people, part of that sort of, the blood cells moving through the system
exactly.
of London.
Exactly, and to circle back, this comes back to what I mean in terms of doing the research. So even if I was a religious person, that doesn't necessarily mean that I would write about my religion. Yes, I'm aware that there might be some sense of, well, this is cultural appropriation. But as I said before, given the diversity in London in terms of the demographic in ages, the demographic of race, of uh, sexual orientation, and heritage, or all the rest of it. For a city like London, there is there is just so much diversity in the tapestry of the city. I suppose it's one thing if you're writing fantastical works, like if you're writing something which is set in Narnia, for example, or writing about the Lilliputians, whatever the case might be. But for a city like London, especially if you're going to capture it authentically, then even as a background description, why wouldn't you feature that stuff?
Yeah.
How
Well,
much deeper you go into on it is something else, but it's there. You're doing it a disservice if you don't mention it, and it's there.
yeah. I think we potentially touched on it a little bit there, so this is a decent segue into this question. But
Mhm.
so when you're reading fiction, what themes do you find particularly appealing?
Oh, for a while I was reading a lot of Christopher Moore books, which is kind of off kilter slapstick humor. So I
Oh,
had a
cool.
friend turn me on to that stuff, like Practical Demon Keeping, which is one of the titles, one of my favorite humor books today. In terms of the stuff that I read in general, the cover might hook me. I do like I can't even say that I like a good thriller necessarily. I'm not necessarily a thriller reader. I'll watch uh, are they called thriller? Yeah, I'll watch an action thriller or an espionage thriller like The Bourne Identity, that kind of
Oh
stuff.
yeah, I love
They,
those movies. They're so good.
and the thing is, they got progressively better. You had The Bourne Identity, and then you had The Bourne Supremacy. Keep me honest, I think this is the order. And then you had The Bourne Ultimatum, which is where Bourne has the fight with Desh, and he does the backflip to get out of the arm lock, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Everything was just progressively better from film to film.
Which
And
Bourne movie is it where he puts the magazine in the toaster to make it blow up?
That's the
Because I
first one.
remember seeing
that
that and
sounds
being
like the
like,
Bourne Identity. I
yeah,
could
I was
be
like,
wrong.
that's the coolest shit. It's such a simple thing. But
Yeah,
immediately I was like, there's Bond doesn't put magazines in toasters. Q would have given him a toaster with a magazine already in it that folded out of his jacket. This is way cooler. This guy's really
Yeah,
resourceful.
yeah. I love those films, but in terms of reading those books, they're not my go-to. I only mention it because even from where I'm sat in this room right now, and I've got my bookshelves here, I had a I had a friend I used to work with who recommended the the Snowman by Joe Nesbo, the the Harry Hurley novels, I think that name is pronounced. And and while they're doorstop books, they're so fucking good.
Yeah.
So I have inhaled the first. There must be some like 13 books in this series with this Inspector Harry, but the first 10 I inhaled, and they're so meticulously plotted, and how the inspector in question, as we see of so many characters now, they're three-dimensional, they're flawed, they're not perfect, they fuck up once in a while, and they have their weaknesses and their
Yeah.
crutches, all the rest of it. But those books I recommend. Again, I don't make a beeline for thrillers, but those books by Joe Nesbo, the Harry Howell novels, which is how the name is spelled, those I can definitely recommend. The in terms of the horror books I would read, it is, for me, it's actually more of a tall order. My close friends will tell you that I'm very picky and I'm not easily pleased. So while I might venture out and try something different, it's not necessarily going to land with me. I do give the nod to, even as I'm saying this shit now, I can't remember the name of the book. Tell a lie. I remember the name of a novella called Narcissus. I cannot remember who the author is. Something makes me think Adam somebody. Actually, do you mind if I Google this and see if...
Yeah, do it.
Yeah.
I think I read this middle of last year or year before, and as I said, while I can read stuff and think it's okay, it's not necessarily moving me to think, well, this is great. But this one novella, Narcissus, I read and I thought, yes. And without giving too much away, one of the themes or tropes it does play with is mirrors. And I just love mirrors as a horror device in terms of, if you look at a mirror long enough, what's going to happen? What's going to happen when you look at the mirror long enough when no one else is around? That really eerie, twisted shit. Not all monsters have big, sharp teeth, but that doesn't make them any less terrifying. Narcissus novella.
Adam Godfrey, is it? Godfrey? Adam Godfrey?
I think that's the one, pink cover. Or
Yes.
are they... Yes,
Yeah,
that's the one. Thank you.
I've never
buy
felt
it.
more like I was back working at Waterstones than in that moment. I got to tell you guys. Pink cover. That's the one. Oh, what a wonderful! It never
I know,
played out.
very vague. My bad.
No, but it was. We'll stick it in as the final recommendation. Get out there and find Narcissus with a pink cover, you saucy beast. But enough about other people's books. What's your next project?
I'm currently working on a short story / novelette, and this is what I mentioned at the beginning of the session, that one of my close author friends had just given her a beta read feedback on it and said, I hope it's not too harsh. I said, no, that's absolutely fine. It's harsh, constructive, and we're still friends. All is good. So I've got another round of edits that I want to do on that. I've also got another pass on the new collection I'm working on. I've also got another pass I want to do on the novel that I'm working on, which is the one which is based in part in... No, I tell a lie. It's not based in Leytonstone. When I was telling you about Tattoo Inc., where I went to see my man and his team to do some research, the tattoo place in question in the story is actually based in Bethnal Green.
Okay.
But the real life inspiration is in Leytonstone. And the reason why I had based that story in Bethnal Green is for a seasoned lifter like myself, and I used to go to Muscleworks. Once upon a time, the Muscleworks in Bethnal Green was at a different address. When they shut down at that address, I remember thinking, oh, I wonder what's going on here. And I had the idea for, why don't I use this place to set this character, as in this character being a tattoo parlor. So this is what I mean when I say that I don't necessarily go to places to scope them out. Well, I wonder if there's anything cool here. It just so happens that when I'm out and about, I might think, oh, that's cool.
I think it's a really cool way to arrive at your stories, and that one sounds like it's going to be an absolute banger. So, where should people go to keep up to date with your news, CC?
Yeah, so the website is www.ccadams.com. This is the wrong time for me to get cramp in my thigh, but I will help through it. On Facebook and Twitter, for those who are still on the latter and haven't jumped ship, I am Mr. Adams Writes. And yeah, in terms of general interaction, do hit me up on my page, hit me up on Twitter. I'm always happy to talk all the genre stuff, all the good stuff, all the creative writing stuff, the craft of the writing as well. Among other things, I'm also a mentor for the HWA, which is the Horror Writers Association. So I do have my fingers in a number of pies, which leads to some very sticky fingers. But there we go. I do like to keep busy, as people will keep telling me.
Yeah. I tell you what, it's been absolutely phenomenal talking with you. Like, I enjoyed your story in the last episode, and also just hearing your outlook on, in particular, the angle that you have on London. It's really special, man. And just thank you for your time. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for fingering our pies.
Yeah, finger our pies more, please.
Oh man, that sounds all kind of suspect. But
well, we're going to turn the mics off now. We'll see how suspect it really is.
It's been good. So thanks for having me on board. It's been cool. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For rich ginger tones on their scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne, and for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?